Unbearable. Oh my god, this is stupid. Hmm. Oof.
Stay healthier without roads. Devices at Canadian Tire.
Oh. Plug you back in. Oh. Oh. My God.
There are large organizations as well as small businesses, so it's very diverse. Now, in this specific fund, it's loans that are to not large companies, because usually when they're large companies, it's a specific project. So it's actually there are now the fund about has $5.7 billion of the capacity that they can loan money for large amounts of money. It has increased from 3.7 to $5.7 billion last year, and 16% of the loans actually are loans that may not be recovered. So that's a major problem, because for these loans, many of them now it's also impossible for the companies to pay the interest on the loans.
So I guess what I'm wondering is when the government agrees to grant these loans, do they know the risks involved? Like, are they already going into it assuming they're going to lose a bunch of this money?
Well, of course, they assess the level of risk. Now, of course, it's they may in some cases underestimate the risk. And one risk that is very important now is the capacity of the organization to reimburse the loan in the context where interest rates have gone up, and therefore a lot of business now it's slowing down in many industries, and that's why it's getting a bit more difficult. So that's why we have this year a 23% increase in the loans that may not be recovered.
I'm wondering, so what does the government have in place? Because obviously, as you said before, this is not the first time we've done something like this. You assume you'll have a certain percentage of loans or default anyway at some point. That's just the nature of business, I guess. How much of this money can the government actually get back? What does history tell us they can get back?
We do not provide that information.
Of course they
don't.
Okay.
That's another issue here is that, of course, the information that is provided is like minimal, and they do not tell how many these loans were written off last year, for instance.
Okay, that's troubling in and of itself. I mean, this is taxpayer money. You would have a right to know. Do you believe some kind of movement afoot to try to get them to give us that information?
Well, yes, there has been in the past, but it's very difficult because the government is always arguing that, well, these companies are in competition with other companies and they don't want to give that information to the public.
Right.
And the counter argument is that, well, if you want money from the government, if you want government assistance, well, then you have to accept to provide more information. Public, because ultimately it's the public that is bearing the risk for these loans. So that's a major problem. What we can notice with the present government is that it's very difficult to get the information.
Can I ask then, if I take that, how many of these end up going to court and actually suing or trying to go after the money that the government didn't get back?
Well, I haven't heard of any cases that went to court. They probably usually find other way to get out of this situation. So whether the loan is written off or whether there is a specific agreement with the company. So I don't know of any case where they went to court.
I know it sounds almost too easy. Anyone fulfilling whatever requirements you need to get a loan from whatever department within the government, and then just say, sorry, it didn't work out, and I can't pay you back, and that's the end of that.
Well, it's probably not that easy, but
hope not.
But still, you have like this fund, le Fonds de Développement Économique. I mean, 16% through this fund are actually may not be recovered. So that's quite a lot. I mean, we could accept that there could be like a small percentage of these loans that could not be recovered, but 16%, and that's increasing every year.
Yeah.
So that's a major issue.
Something's going
and of
wrong.
course, the government again doesn't want to discuss about this.
That's not okay. As you mentioned, that's $500 million that's not being spent on things that are much needed, like the renovation of schools. what should the government be doing here? Like, I'm wondering, do these businesses need more support so that they can be successful? Should the government see that they're in financial difficulty and at that point intervene to try and so that we don't end up in this situation with a $500 million loss?
Yeah, well, it's always a problem because then the company comes and says, well, we need a little more, and then it's going to get better. And so you need to make a decision. But overall, I think we need to have a discussion on government support in the context of 2024. We're not in the 1970s and the 1980s where governments would help companies to be able to create jobs. We're in the context where now we need manpower. We have manpower shortage in many areas. So we're supporting companies that are providing jobs, but we don't have people to do the job. So that's like, we need to change the paradigm. We need to think differently. If these companies cannot get funding from private sources, well, we really need to question how relevant government support is.
Sure.
And should we do that? And, you know, there are so many examples in the past few years of large amounts of money that were losses. And the most recent example, of course, is the C-Series, where the government of Quebec lost $1.3 billion to Bombardier, Bombardier and Airbus, which are not, you know, small companies, which are owned by large, big families, the Bombardier family, and we need to do that. And should we do that better? And of course, now the government of Quebec wants to increase the government support to different companies, and they're developing new programs. And of course, that's creating jobs, but that's creating jobs in the context where there's a shortage of areas. And we have to increase immigration to have more manpower. So, like, there's something that doesn't work, and we need to have a discussion on government support.
I think that becomes pretty obvious. Mr. Gosselin, we're out of time. I want to thank you so much for your input this afternoon. Thank you.
Okay.
In Quebec City, that's the money, $600 million. That's money lost every year. Maybe not 600 million, but it's a continuum here. Government lends money, it doesnn't get paid back. Man, you write it off, we'll do it again next year.
Like,
something doesn't add up.
Go to the banks. Why are we?
What if private investment is not there? Why would the government then say, "Well, it's good enough for us to invest"? Even
Sure, let's do it. That's what I mean. Doesn't make sense.
This is 24 Hours of 800 on News Talk Radio, CJAD 800. JJ Cardinal Funeral Home is proudly family-owned and operated, having been in service to the community for over 50 years, helping families and loved ones navigate some of life's most difficult moments. They offer pre-planning services, comfortable and spacious visitation and reception rooms, cremation on site, as well as a unique columbarium that is integrated in their breathtaking chapels. JJ Cardinal Funeral Home. Let their family serve your family with understanding, compassion, and integrity. Call 514-631-1511 or visit jjcardinal.ca.
1 in 2 people struggling with their mental health aren't getting the help they need. That's why for Bell Let's Talk Day, we're highlighting initiatives such as 988 Suicide Crisis Helpline. Anyone in Canada can call or text 988 24 hours a day if they are thinking of suicide or worried about someone they know. To find out more about 988 Suicide Crisis Helpline or to discover other resources that create real change in mental health every day, visit bell.ca/let's talk.
You're listening to the Voice of Montreal, News Talk Radio, CJAD 800, an iHeart radio station.
Good morning, it's 1 o'clock. I'm James Foster with your CTV News update. It's going to be a nice day eventually today. And as I look at the long-range forecast right now, I am seeing 3 different images of potential freezing rain which is why there is a freezing rain warning in effect for Montreal and surrounding area. It is -9 downtown. I'll tell you just when it's going to get slippery coming up. But first, here's what's making news. A fourth FAE teaching union has adopted the agreement in principle with the government, but barely. Teachers from the West Montreal Education Union, who represent teachers at the Margaret School Service Center, voted last night just over 50% in favor. You can basically round it up to 51%. This vote comes after similar results from the 3 other unions that have greenlit the deal thus far, all just over 50%. The Laval Union is so far the only one that has voted against the deal. The contract needs 5 of the 9 local unions to vote in favor of it. So far, 4 have passed the contract, but only by small margins. The contract also needs a majority of FAE members overall for it to pass. So while it has passed individual votes with 51, 52, and as high as 57%, that rejected vote is by near 70%. The union is holding tonight. If the deal fails, it doesn't mean that teachers will resume their strike right away and kids will be back out of class, but it would mean that the unions would have to hold another general assembly. Their members would then vote on a new strike mandate and what exactly they want negotiators to take action on. The Quebec Superior Court judge has authorized a class action lawsuit against 20 regional health authorities in the province on behalf of residents of public long-term care homes that experienced major COVID outbreaks during the pandemic's first year. Patrick Martin Menard, the lawyer for the residents, says that the government failed to implement its own pandemic plan, leading to avoidable suffering and deaths.
This tragedy was not simply what we would call a thunderstorm in a blue sky. It was something that was the result of a series of negligent practices and poor decision-making by public health authorities and by those who were responsible for planning and preparing the healthcare system for the pandemic.
We seek damages for at least one of these. $100,000 for each resident who is infected, as well as damages for those who didn't get sick and for family members of residents. Israel-Hamas war continues as the 4-month mark.
Israeli officials said Monday was the deadliest day for the country's military in Gaza, with 24 soldiers being killed. This comes as Israel pushes for a 2-month pause in fighting in exchange for the remaining hostages being held by Hamas. Meanwhile, Palestinian health officials say more than 25,400 people have been killed in Gaza since the start of the war. The United Nations has warned that over 500,000 people are under the threat of catastrophic hunger in Gaza.
Your eyes are so red.
12 hours of gaming.
Go look at your eyes. They're so
And from your
red.
Dorming Who Weather Center today, the good news is today is not going to be the day for freezing rain. That might be early.
Go look at your eyes. They're so red.
-2 on the day today with a chance of flurries.
Can't see
Now,
on there.
overnight, that's when things get a little dicey.
Come look at those
Because
bottles
temperatures will
doing.
be just below the freezing mark, but Thursday's daytime high is +1. That could lead to a risk of some early morning freezing rain on Thursday. And then if that wasn't another bout of freezing rain Thursday into Friday, that's right now the forecast.
Freezing rain.
Temperatures again,
What?
not below
Love
freezing
you.
overnight,
Love you.
but on Friday, daytime
Hear what
high
I'm
is
saying?
3
Freezing
degrees.
rain?
So that switchover
Huh?
period between the
Freezing
two
rain?
is where we
What
could
was it?
get the freezing rain or rain. So early Thursday, early Friday could be a okay. -9 downtown, wind chill in effect at -18. The next update is at 6.
It's your radio. Put it on CJAD 800 to hear Aaron and Natasha.
I think it's a great idea. I think now is not the time to do it. We are a province in turmoil.
Montreal.
It costs substantially less than
Over the next 10
$108
years.
billion.
Yeah.
My ideas are free.
Weekdays 2 to 6. Tell your smart speaker.
Play CJAD 800.
Scare you more than having another baby? I'm Dr. Elroy Schuker. If you don't know this already, at Vasectomy Montreal, we have taken care of thousands of patients as experts of the no needle, no scalpel, and virtually painless procedure. Most importantly, we take extensive precautions in a state-of-the-art private clinic where our safety measures keep you and your family jewels safe. Book your appointment online now at vasectomymontreal.ca.
1 in 2 people struggling with their mental health aren't getting the help they need. That's why for Bell Let's Talk Day, we're highlighting organizations such as the Canadian Red Cross. They now provide training that helps individuals develop tools and strategies to manage stress, and learn how to support themselves and others. To find out more about the Canadian Red Cross's services or to discover other resources that create real change in mental health every day, visit bell.ca/let's talk.
This program is for entertainment purposes only. The opinions expressed do not necessarily reflect the views of CJAD 800 or Bell Media.
From the City of Angels near the Pacific Ocean.
Oh,
Good morning,
really?
good evening, wherever you may be across the nation, around the world. I'm George Norrie. This is Coast to Coast AM. Later tonight,
That
Holly
is
Faust
fucking
joins us
ridiculous.
with my journey out of the darkness about the afterlife. Here's what's happening. The Doomsday Clock, which shows how symbolically close the world is to nuclear Armageddon, is to remain at 90 seconds to midnight. Scientists have listed reasons for keeping its hands the closest they've ever been to doomsday, but stop short of nudging it any further forward. The threat of a nuke arms race, the Ukraine war, the climate change concerns, all factors, they said. The clock is set annually by the Bulletin of the Atomic Science. Donald Trump has cruised to victory in New Hampshire's Republican presidential contest, marching closer to a November rematch with Democratic President Joe Biden, even as his only remaining rival, former UN Ambassador Nikki Haley, whom he appointed, vowed to push on. Dr. John Curtis, onlinecolumnist.com, is with us here. John, he's on his way, isn't he?
He is, George, but I want the audience to know that in New Hampshire, just as an example, Democrats are allowed to vote in the GOP primary. So a lot of independents and Democrats who were really never Trumpers, the anti-Trump forces, voted for Haley in this election. If they were not allowed to vote, like in most primaries, where you have to be registered by one party or another, Trump would have won by 25%. So it's a fake appearance of an 11 or 12 point win by Trump. It would have been at least double that had they not permitted independents and Democrats.
But still a strong win. Still a strong win, though.
Very strong win. And yet Haley has vowed to press on because she's now representing the never Trump part of the GOP and the Democrat Party right now. And I don't think that she can really last much longer because the situation, the primaries get much worse for her in South Carolina. Even though she's a former governor, Trump is running about 50% above what she's running there. So I think she has very, very little chance of making any headway in South Carolina. At some point, her donors are going to say to her, it's a losing proposition at this point, and they're going to pull the plug on her. But I think it's an astounding accomplishment for somebody under the gun, 91 felony charges, and just relentless harassment by the U.S. press, basically throwing their weight behind anybody, including Haley, but Trump, for him to pull out these two victories. Remember, in 2016, Trump did not win Iowa. That was won by Ted Cruz.
Right.
So he just won, the two beginning primaries, and I think, that gives him tremendous momentum. And I don't think that Haley can make up much of the gap at all in South Carolina. Far worse of a showing than she had today because they allow Democrats and independents to vote in the GOP race.
Keep in touch with us, John. The Los Angeles Times, facing what senior leadership described this week as a financial crisis, has commenced a round of painful layoffs across the newsroom, a workforce reduction that is set to be one of the most severe in the newspaper's 142-year history. The cuts will impact at least 115 journalists, or slightly more than 20% of the entire newsroom. John Truman Wolf, author of The 99 Strongest Banks in America, with us here. John, it's a sign of the times for these newspapers with the internet, isn't it? George, besides the LA Times, about 2,700 news reporters from the Washington Times or the Washington Post, NPR, CNN have been losing people. I think the general public, George, is just getting sick of the press that have become their PR organs. They're no longer news organizations.
Well, it's a tough time, though, for these newspapers as the internet keeps chipping away at these places.
They are, it is tough times, and it is chipping away. The LA Times is losing $40 million a year, George. That's why the layoff.
Okay, thank you, John. John Truman. Award-winning journalist Charles Osgood, who anchored CBS Sunday Morning for 22 years, and also was the host of the long-running radio program The Osgood File, has died at his home in New Jersey. He was 91. The cause of death, dementia. Drinking just one energy drink a month could increase your risk of sleep problems, according to a new study. Regularly knocking back cans of drinks of these boosts your chances of insomnia, according to researchers in Norway. In a moment, pharmacist Ben Fuchs joins us from criticalhealthnews.com. We're going to take calls a little early with him to get you some tips. Don't forget the website. Let's set a record. Go to it with your smartphone. Go to it with your desktop. criticalhealthnews.com. criticalhealthnews.com. And the number to call for assistance when you hear him talk and you haven't had a chance to write it down, 1-855-949-7234. Up next, pharmacist Ben Fuchs from criticalhealthnews.com.
Why should I have a funeral?
This is Bridget Federley from Canaan Federley Funeral Home. As family and friends reunite during a funeral, mourning becomes a shared experience. We cry, we support each other, and we share warm memories. At Canaan Federley, we work hand in hand with our families to honor the life of their loved one.
Canaan Federley, recipient of the Consumer Choice Award from 2021 to 2023. For information, call 514-481-5301 or visit CanaanFederley.com.
A loved one's use of alcohol, drugs, or medication can have a serious impact on your life. For support and information, contact Drugs, Health, and Referral. Confidential, free, and available 24/7. Call or chat via drughealth.Quebec.
Elevate your home and transform your space with C&M Textiles. Discover a world of endless possibilities with their exquisite fabrics, state-of-the-art motorized blinds, customized window treatments, and more. Visit one of their 4 showrooms and start creating your dream home, office, or event space. With bespoke products that not only provide privacy and light control, but also reflect your individuality, bring your vision to life, one room at a time. Shop now. C&M Textiles. Do it once, do it right. cmtextiles.com. Tired of endless waiting rooms just to see a doctor? Consider Eden Telemed, Quebec's leading telemedicine platform, providing fast and affordable access to private doctors. Whether you need medical advice, prescriptions, blood tests, doctor's notes, imagery, or quick access to specialists, Eden Telemed has you covered. Get same-day appointments with a Quebec licensed doctor from the comfort of your home. 100% safe. Private insurance accepted. Experience healthcare on your terms. Visit EdenTelemed.ca today. That's EdenTelemed.ca. A lone wolf, a survivalist, an investigator. Justin Hartley as Kachal in the new CTV series that will leave you breathless. Tracker. New series starts February 11th, right after the Super Bowl on CTV.
And welcome back to Coast. George Norrie with you, pharmacist Ben Fuchs, with us from criticalhealthnews.com, registered pharmacist, nutritionist, cosmetic chemist, as the compounding custom medications and formulations of nutritional and skincare products, and consulting with doctors and patients, and graduating from the University of Colorado School of Pharmacy. Tom and I were in Colorado a week and a half ago, Ben, and it was going down to 0 degrees.
But you know what? The next day it was 40 degrees.
And I know, it's strange.
Actually, this time we had a cold snap. Usually, the cold and the snow are gone in a day or two. We don't want to tell everybody that. We don't want a lot of people.
This has been a cold winter so far.
Yeah, a little bit. New York, I heard back east it was pretty cold.
What's new with Pharmacist Ben?
Well, just came back from a Saturday in Houston, Texas on Saturday with my friends Tom Chenault and the Browns. We talked a lot about longevity and so how to build a business. And by the way, we don't talk about this a lot on the show, George, but if anybody's interested in building a business and having a side income or a full-time income, this is a great thing. Longevity represents a great business opportunity and a business opportunity that's win-win. Not only do you make money, but you help change lives. That's the most basic and fundamental level areas, which is the level of good health. And we're doing another one in my lab in February. So anybody who's in the Colorado area, Denver area, you're welcome to come February 17th to my lab. We're doing a Super Saturday in Jersey.
Ben, viruses are still hanging around. RSV, COVID.
Yeah. You know why? Because our immune systems are suppressed because we're eating lousy and we're living lousy. And that's really the bottom line, George. You know, cancer, I was just reading how cancer rates are increasing. Diabetes is going through the roof.
Among younger people.
Among younger people, that's exactly right. And you were just talking about about energy drinks and affecting sleep. You know, 30% of Americans have insomnia. On television, there's mattress commercials.
That's because they listen to my show, right?
They could do that. That's right. And but what's the problem? The problem is that we are under duress. And for people who like to watch the news and follow current events, it's almost impossible not to be overwhelmed with stress. You have to really be like a ninja or like a monk in order to maintain center, to not be going crazy. And caffeine drinks and sugar and foods and fast food lifestyles, all of these contribute to the overwhelming sense of bodily duress. Elevate stress hormones, elevate cortisol, and all of this not only leads to a suppressed immune system, and that's where you get your cancer from, but also and anxiety, but also just this susceptibility to bacteria and viruses and microbes. And that's what we really want to understand. We have these pharmacological strategies for dealing with all health issues, and it doesn't serve us, George, because the more pharmacology we have and the more medicalization we have, the more doctoring we have, the more hospitals we have, the more protocols we have, the sicker we get. We're missing the fundamentals, which is just clean living. And of course, nutritional supplementation is a part of that, as is exercise, as is meditation, spirituality, the relaxation response, breathing. These are the simple, basic things that we've got to start to incorporate into our lives if we're going to be healthy. Because you know what? The medical model is great for helping us survive dangers, but it's not great for helping us live a long, healthy, vital life. It doesn't give us quality of life. We blame the doctors sometimes, but the doctors don't. That's not in their wheelhouse. Their wheelhouse is to fix us when we get hit by a car, and that's great. Physicians and the medical model is great for what we call heroic medicine. But when it comes to ambulatory medicine, lifestyle medicine, helping us live, giving us quality of life, the medical model is not equipped for that. But we can do it ourselves, and that's why I'm on this mission to help people understand how to leverage the power of the human body, the power of nutrition, the power of clean living, and help reverse chronic disease and live a long life.
Ben, why do so many people have high glucose levels?
Because we're eating so much sugar. Oh my God. The average American eats over 150 pounds of sugar a year.
150 pounds?
Yeah, it's crazy. Half a pound a day. It's ridiculous.
That's because it's in everything, right?
It's in everything. You know what? The human body didn't grow up with sugar. We've only had these crazy amounts of sugar in our food for 150 years, 200 years. Up until the Middle Ages, the late Middle Ages, there wasn't a lot of sugar around. We were lucky from an evolutionary perspective. We were lucky if we got a little bit of honey. You know, you have to go through a beehive to get it. The body didn't grow up on sugar. So what happened was, because you do need a little bit of sugar, we evolved to be sugar hunters. We evolved to be on a one-track mission to find sugar. But over the last 100 years, there's sugar every 50 yards practically, and increasingly so. You know, they put salt in sweet foods, salt in food so they can put more sugar in the food. So you have sugar in ketchup, and you have sugar in mustard, and you have sugar in soup, and you have sugar in turkey. I go to Whole Foods to buy my food. Even at Whole Foods, the turkey has sugar in it. There's sugar everywhere, and the body isn't equipped to handle that. And by the way, George, if you want to be healthy, if you want to reverse chronic disease, there's only two things you need to focus on from a biological perspective. These are the two main points of bodily breakdown that lead to every single chronic degenerative disease that you can name, and that is the digestive system and the blood sugar system. If you focus on digestive health and blood sugar health using nutritional supplements like ingesting sweeties and the nightly essence, exit enzymes, eating less calories, reducing your sugar intake, every single chronic disease symptom that you can name will start to reverse itself. Just those 2 points, George, the digestive system and the blood sugar system.
How versatile is the human body?
How what?
Versatile is the human body.
I'm not sure what you mean by versatile.
Its ability to
recover and to be resilient.
Bounce back.
Oh my God. George, did you ever cut yourself shaving? How long does it take a shaving cut to heal? That demonstration of how fast it takes a shaving cut to heal, a paper cut to heal, is a demonstration of the healing power of the body. When we have chronic diseases, George, in essence, we have little cuts inside our body. We have little damages inside our body. Under ordinary circumstances, those damages should heal just like a paper cut heals, or just like a shaving cut heals. But because we're constantly bombarding the body with cutting agents, with damaging agents, with traumatizing agents, the body doesn't get a chance to heal. And then you compound that with, as we say, long-term stresses, sugar intake, and nutritional deficiencies. And what ends up happening is we suppress the body's ability to heal that's demonstrated and manifested by the healing of cuts and scrapes and burns. The inside of the body is designed to heal just as well as the outside of the body, which we can visibly see. But because of poor lifestyle choices, it does.
Email in from Bridget. She says she's suffering from major amounts of stress, but does not want to go on any kinds of pills.
Well, there's a couple things you can do, but the most important and the quickest way to reduce stress is to provide the body with its number one most important agent, which is oxygen. You know, the ultimate stress of oxygen is the lack of oxygen. And if you want to experience a panic attack, I don't know why anybody would, but if you want to give a friend who has panic attacks and you want to experience what they're going through, hold your breath. And what you'll find is when you hold your breath for 10 or 15 seconds, there'll be a little voice in your head that says, okay, time to breathe. And you go past that. And you go 30 seconds or maybe 35 seconds. And all of a sudden, you're going to start to shake. And you're going to notice that you're hot. And you'll notice that you're really freaked out and have anxiety to the extent that you're holding your breath. That's a panic attack. And everybody who gets panic attacks knows that right before they get a panic attack, they're holding their breath. Well, we don't necessarily, everybody doesn't have panic attacks, but we go through these mild anxieties that are related to not breathing correctly. So if you want to reduce your anxiety immediately and associated with that, improve your immune system and lower your blood pressure, practice slow, deep breathing. And it won't even take but 5 minutes of slow, deep breathing. You start to notice the relaxation response kick in. And when I say slow, deep breathing, slow, deep rhythmic breathing, I'm talking about slowly, because that's important. Excuse me. The slowness of the breath tells the body it's safe. And then the depth of breathing activates the diaphragm, which acts like a pump. And for folks who have heart disease, by the way, the diaphragm can take some of the load off of the heart. It acts like a second pump. So deep breathing, depth of breathing, and then rhythmic breathing. Body loves rhythm. This activation of the relaxation response is one of the most important things we could do to improve our immunity and quality of life and longevity.
We're going to take calls shortly with pharmacist Ben Fuchs and all of next hour as well. Let me give you the website, criticalhealthnews.com. I want everybody to go to it. I want to set a record. I want their webmaster to go nuts. There's a phone number to call if Ben says something that you want to write down, but you've missed it. 1-800.
Un jour de plus au paradis. Un jour de plus au paradis. Bang! Allumette! Donne-moi du feu! Toute cette lumière qu'on a dans les mains! Ouais! Allumette! Y'a pas de paix, pas de calumet! Alien! Sans limite! Cagoulé, c'est pas Halloween! Mais saluez, laisse-moi les saluer! Pas t'allumer, comme une allumette!
Guimac pour le mic check, bang bang! Nick pour les allumer. Je suis en tournée dans le Québec. Je ne suis qu'une bête de cirque pour les amuser. Tes moves de bitch, faut les assumer. Ne compte pas sur moi, tu ne sais pas calculer. J'ai tellement marché longtemps que j'ai les semelles usées. Fais sortir la fumée par les vitres du SUV. Je fais tourner des ballons sur mon nez comme un fuck en Alaska. Je suis sur le bord d'exploser. Ma vie toujours au bord de la catastrophe. Badass, 200 km/h, je m'attache pas. Perdu quelque part dans le Canada. Le temps d'un couple, je fais de la calbum. Frappe à la foi. J'ai les allumettes. La magie est dans l'air, pas dans l'amulette. T'as rien vu, rien entendu, tu restes muet. Quand les chacals s'acharnent sur toi dans la ruette. Je fume du gaz d'avion, pas de la ciboulette. Sans invitation, pas de s'il vous plaît. Ils veulent me shoot, mais j'ai la vie rapide, donc c'est pisse. Silhouette.
Comme une allumette, mon premier dingue light avec une allumette. Pas de bed, on pas de calumet. Ce soir je mets le feu. Hey. Équipe d'aliens, vous ne laissez qu'à manger dans la même assiette. Qu'on a autre affaire de sieste, comme monsieur Iniesta. Hey, trop de comportement, je te conseille fortement. Je peux pas faire en sorte que je devienne hors de moi. Frérot, l'époque me manque pas, toujours sur demande. C'est fou comme l'envie de posséder un Glock me hante. Pourquoi tu parles de ma vie? Les gages avec tes hâtes qui paraît on m'a dit. Ouais, j'ai beaucoup appris, le masque se cache derrière les beaux habits. Le plus discret, souvent je suis habile. Tu marqué comme une trace de pas dans la neige. Si tu me dis, faudra que tu marches dans la brèche. Maintenant c'est la guerre, c'est trop tard pour la trêve. Je suis comme Léonidas, je préfère qu'on m'achève. Ton peuple trahir pour... Je suis toujours efficace. Tu vois avec la bombe, ça te pète au visage. De changer de mode de vie, faudrait que t'envisages. À force de naviguer, j'ai perdu mon navire sur la mer. Tout ce qu'on a vu, c'est la mer. La galère laisse un goût amer. Je connais personne plus fort que ma mère. Tu démentes religieuses, crois-moi sans tous venir. Je veux dire dans son fond, c'est tellement va s'en dégager. Tout ce que tu veux, c'est la pneumatique creuse.
Allumette! Toute cette lumière qu'on a dans les mains! Allumette! Y'a pas de paix, pas de calumet! Alien! Sans cagoulé, c'est pas Halloween! Mais saluez, laisse-moi les saluer! Pas d'allumé, comme une allumette! On est au bord, précipice. Camion, léger, feu d'artifice. Cargaison prête à décoller sur la piste. Jour de prison. Précisément pour toi une vanne, du cara. Chacun son tour, la route tourne, personne n'y échappera. J'ai la main faite pour le prochain qui m'attendra. Je suis plus zen. Non, j'ai cravé mes chakras. Allumette, bidon, essence, cam de premier choix.
Are you serious?
Alloué, ni mauvais, ni bon. J'applique mes propres lois. Les gains se multiplient, le produit se dans le but se persécuter et dans la ville se persécuter. Je laisse ma place dans ce futur système.
La rue elle-même, rationnellement, vit cette life démesurément. VDR tout naturellement, état d'âme prématurément. Cherche la lumière n'importe quelle manière, ou la liberté sans le corps cayenne. On s'offre des vagues mais se lâche la main. Je viens les larmes de le Jack Daniel. J'écris à la hache, pas assez tant que je suis pas assis dans la A7. Arraché, j'ai trop marché dans mes warachis. Malsain, sale martien dans leur galaxie. Je ris quand les gros disques qu'on a fondé. Je rime pour les autres kids qui sont foncés. Il a pris les soldats pour le Sundance. Dimanche soir au boss, fuck les skis sur le Sunday. Plus de beat like que Cobain. Je suis dans les étoiles comme Kobe. Peu importe, je me fais combien. Pour la vie, je chien comme Toby. Extraterrestre, fuck la race humaine. Je vais pas les mots pour te rassurer. Elle me demande pourquoi ça blesse quand tu m'aimes. Je réponds que l'amour est une allumette.
Hey y'all, today we're going to talk about breaking the cycle of depression. Now, the trickiest thing about depression as a clinician dealing with it is that one problem leads to another problem. Depression is almost like the HIV/AIDS of mental illness because it attacks your very ability to fight back. So once you feel depressed, it's hard to get out of bed, it's hard to get motivated. And then once it's hard to get motivated, other parts of your life start to fall apart. And so this creates a vicious cycle. And it turns out that there's one central point which can actually disarm the cycle, which is our ability of perception, or more specifically, how depression creates particular cognitive biases that then make our life worse. Before we dive into the details, I just wanted to tell y'all a little bit about myself. So I'm someone who studied for 7 years to become a monk and ended up becoming a psychiatrist. If y'all are interested in more resources on depression, check out the various videos on our YouTube channel, our resource pack, or even check out Dr. K's guide, which is sort of my take on depression. How do I approach patients when they walk into my office? How do I sort of figure out what's clinical and what's non-clinical? And today we're going to be sharing with you a non-clinical perspective on depression, which is the kind of stuff that's included in the guide. So let's go back to this idea of perception. So before we kind of get into why perception is so important, let's take a quick look at the cycle of depression. So what do we know scientifically about what happens to someone when they become depressed? So it starts with an inciting event, okay? So what we know scientifically is that most people who get depressed usually start with something bad. There's some kind of normal bad thing that happens in life. There's a breakup, we lose a loved one, we sort of get an F on a test. Something happens, and then the first thing is that many people recover from it. But if you end up with depression, something happens and you don't recover from it. And let's understand a little bit about what that cycle is. So when there's an inciting event, the first thing that happens is that there's a cognitive bias that occurs. And so the problem with the cognitive bias is it shapes the way that we see the world. We start to see it in a negative manner. And so even though things are objectively better than we think they are, our mind doesn't see it that way. Now, before we kind of get further into it, we're going to show y'all a cool experiment that shows you how your mind, when it doesn't know something, will just make things up. It's a really great experiment, which is that most people don't realize that you actually have blind spots in both of your eyes. I know right now you're looking at the world and you think that you can see everything in front of you, but you literally cannot. There's actually a part of your vision that is a blind spot where you can't see anything. And it turns out that your mind constructs almost like an AI what should be there. So we're going to start by showing you this principle. So what I want y'all to do is sit up straight, close your left eye, and then hold your left finger out in front of you kind of like this. Okay, so we want to hold our left finger, and then we're going to be looking at our left finger with our right eye. And then I want you to put your two fingers together, so focus on the left finger, the opposite finger from the eye. And then what I want y'all to do is move the right finger slowly away. So as you focus on this finger, what you'll notice is there's a period right about here where you actually cannot see this finger. You can even wiggle it around a little bit, and you'll notice that it's completely gone. If you move to the left, you can see it. If you move to the right, you can see it. But there's actually a blind spot right here. And this is absolutely insane because it teaches us one very simple principle, which is that when the mind doesn't actually have information, it makes shit up. And this is a huge problem in depression. So let's go back to this idea of an inciting event. So once we have an inciting event, there's a set of cognitive biases that start to come into play. So let's talk about what these are. The first is negative interpretation of ambiguous events. Okay? So what this means is that let's say you're in the break room and a colleague of yours is in the break room and they don't say hi to you while they're grabbing their coffee and you're grabbing your coffee. So if your mind is depressed, it's going to take this ambiguous information and interpret it in the most negative way possible. But it's not that the person dislikes you, it's that your mind is doing this business again, where it doesn't actually see what's going on, but it fills it in with whatever the depressive character of your mind is. This is bias number one. And we'll talk a little bit about how to deal with these. So bias number two is a selection bias towards the negative. Now, what does this mean? So I'm sure that y'all have been in this kind of situation where someone is giving you feedback, and they give you positive feedback and they give you negative feedback. But sometimes our mind is kind of tricky and it actually ignores all of the positive feedback, and then it sort of narrows down or focuses entirely on the negative feedback. The third bias that we create, this one is so tricky, it's so subtle and so devastating, is an overgeneralization of memories. Okay, now this is really important to understand. It's subtle. It's healthy, it remembers specific. So if my mind is healthy, let's say I get a performance review where I get good feedback and negative feedback. What the mind will naturally do, if I'm healthy, it'll say, okay, I'm doing these things good and I'm doing these things poorly. But if I am depressed, what starts to happen is I overgeneralize. The next day, all I will remember is that performance review went terribly. Even though my boss said, hey, you're doing a fantastic job, but I tend to ignore that. So I tend to overgeneralize. And if you talk to people who are depressed, or maybe you've been this way, maybe you're depressed, you'll sort of notice that they speak in very general terms. My life sucks. The world is going to hell. Everything sucks. Everything sucks. Everything sucks. And if you ask them for specifics, they can give you specifics, and we'll get to that in a second. But there is something at play in the brain where their brain is sort of overgeneralizing things and removing a lot of positivity. So let's take a quick look at how this manifests very practically. So if I am going through a day, let's say I get one positive event, one negative event, and one neutral event. So let's say I go to work. And I actually had a good performance review. My boss said, you did a fantastic job. Here are a couple of things you need to work on. This is a good thing. My boss said I did a fantastic job. Then there's the neutral event. There's the person who doesn't say hi. And then I get a text from someone that I've been on 3 dates with saying, I don't think this is going to work. If I'm a non-depressed person, if my mind isn't depressed, on this day I had one piece of bad news, one piece of good news, and then all kinds of stuff happened in my day, not just this, all kinds of stuff happened in my day that's relatively neutral, right? Some people said hi, some people didn't say hi. But if I am depressed, what ends up happening? First of all, this gets removed from my memory. I literally do not think about it. The neutral thing gets converted to a negative thing, and then there are the negative things. So whereas on balance, +1, a 0, and a -1, in the mind of a depressed person, I have a 0, a -1, and a -1. So in my life, instead of even breaking even, I convert breaking even into a -2. What's to happen next? So now as I start to see the world like this, the world becomes objectively worse, right? Because like my mind cannot see the positive information. And let's take a look at what this looks like. So now I decide that I'm bad at my job, or people don't like me, I'll be alone forever. So if we sort of look at this for a second, we begin to realize that in people who are depressed lives, everything feels like it's going wrong, right? This thing is going wrong, and this thing is going wrong, and this thing is going wrong. Everything's going wrong at the same time. And so if you have problems at your job, if you have problems with your friendship, what does the mind end up concluding? If every dimension of your life is going wrong, is it really every dimension of life that's the problem? No. Then our mind puts all these three things together and concludes, I am bad. And this, by the way, is the crux of something called negative self-attitude. So the key hallmark of depression is a negative self-attitude. The way that you see yourself is incredibly negative. We get to see ourselves as incredibly negative, it's because of this, right? I suck at this, I suck at this, I suck at this. But this, in turn, is based on a perception problem. So then what happens is once I have negative self-attitude, then we enter all the good science about depression, right? Then what I start to do is I start to have problems with motivation. I start to have problems with inflammation. Now, as I have negative self-attitude, my serotonin level maybe decreases. And so then we enter into treatment. Now, here's the problem with treatment, is that when we're treating someone with depression, there's a lot of things we can do as psychiatrists or therapists. We can help people cognitively reframe. We can help validate their emotions. We can work on the emotional part of the brain. We can work on the cognitive part of the brain. But this is what's the big thing that's missing. What perpetuates the cycle is actually the perception problem, right? Because it's not that actually three things in your life went wrong. It's only that one thing in your life went wrong, but you're unable to see it that way. And the reason that, I don't know if this kind of makes sense, but the reason that psychiatrists suck at altering your perception is because that is literally the one thing that you cannot do, right? So as a psychiatrist, I can talk to you about your emotions. I can validate your emotions. I can decompress your emotions. I can give you a hug. I can tell you I think you're a wonderful human being. I can do all this kind of stuff. We can also do things like cognitive behavioral therapy. We're gonna make charts. What are your cognitions? What are your behaviors? What are your emotions? We can do all this stuff because it involves words, right? It involves action. But the one thing that we can't change is the way that you see the world. And so the problem with this now is that since we aren't good at it as psychiatrists, we actually don't have intervention for it because it's something that happens within you. And since we don't have a sort of intervention for it, what this means is that this one part of the cycle of depression has been horribly by the field of psychiatry. And the real problem here is that this one part of your brain that's been horribly neglected is actually the most important part for propagating the cycle of depression. It's the thing that actually happens the earliest. And even if you look at people who are resilient, so if you do studies on people, if you look at studies of people who are resilient, what you discover is these setbacks is different from people who are not resilient. It all comes down to a perception difference. So people who are resilient will say, okay, this thing, I didn't do great today, but I learned something, right? So like, at least I'll be better tomorrow. That they interpret their events is very different. Hey y'all, if you're interested in applying some of the principles that we share to actually create change in your life, check out Dr. Chris Guide to Mental Health. It combines over 2 decades of my experience of both being a monk and a psychiatrist, and distills all of the most important things I've learned into a choose your own adventure format. So check out the link in the bio and start your journey today. So what do we do about it? There are a couple of in the system of yoga. And the reason that I love the system of yoga is because it is strong at everything that psychotherapy is weak at. Because psychotherapy is about, I'm going to do something to you, right? You're going to come into my office, I'm going to sit here, and I'm going to therapize you. But in yoga, it's all about a single person, right? So there's no one there to help you. You're sitting there, you're meditating. And so the other cool thing about yoga is it's very good at training perception. System of meditation called Pratyahara, which is all about training your perception. There's dozens of practices. There's also in the guide, by the way. So here's what we're going to teach you. We're going to teach you one very simple thing, which is called the mentality materiality exercise. This exercise comes from this awesome Buddhist text called the Vishuddhimagga. And the Vishuddhimagga literally means the path of purification. So this is the way that you purify different parts of yourself. And they have a beautiful part in there. They have a beautiful chapter in there about purifying your perception. And what they share with us is something called the mentality materiality exercise. It's very verbose, that's just how they talk. So this exercise is actually quite simple. It is to acknowledge that anything that you see in the world has a materiality to it. So here I've got a vial of, I think, a sample perfume, okay? So if I look at this, there's some attributes of this that come from the vial, right? So this vial is, it's clear, it's white, it's kind of like a little bit cold, it's not very heavy, it's light. All of these things are actually in the object. The question is that when I see this object, I do not see it that way, right? What I see is, oh, I like this perfume, I don't like this perfume, it's too small, man, I should have bought a bigger bottle because I really liked it, and now I can't find it online, and now this is a problem that's all true, by the way. This is something I was going to get for my wife time because I procrastinated, and now I still have this thing that's been sitting on my desk for a year. So the key thing here is that if you look at the world, let's say you see your dog has certain physical material attributes. It's hairy, it's smelly, it has a cute face, but even cuteness, right? So what is cuteness? Cuteness is something that our mind attaches to the dog. And this is the point of the mentality materiality exercise, is to notice what are all of the things that are actually a part of the object, and what are all of the things that my mind adds to it. And what you will discover is mind-blowing, because 99% of your perception doesn't actually come from the outside world. It actually comes from you. Yep. So when you look at your dog and your dog makes you feel good, the making you feel good is not in the fur of the dog. It's not in the eyes of the dog. It's not in the wagging tail of the dog. This is just a dog sitting there wagging its tail. What makes you feel good comes from within you. And this is also where, if we sort of stop and think about it, a lot of what we get upset about, this person did not say hi to me in the break room this morning. Hold on a second. What does your mind attach? What is the mentality that you attach to that materiality. The materiality is I walked into the break room, I bought my coffee, they got their coffee, they walked out, and I walked out. That is all that happened. That's it. And yet our mind attaches all kinds of meaning to it. And then you may say, but my mind attaches meaning because it's logical, right? Because it knows that I am unlike. And now we get to the second thing that we're going to talk about. So just practice the mentality of materiality, where I want you all to just notice your internal reactions and what you attach to objects outside of you. And this is where in the Vishuddhimagga they talk about 40 attributes of materiality. So they say that an object can be hard, it can be soft, it can be heavy, it can be light, it can be warm, it can be cold, it can have temperature, it can have smoothness, it can have whatever. So they attach all these different attributes, and none of them are going to be the stuff that your mind attaches. To like something or dislike something, something's good or something is bad. These are all attached by your mind. So do that practice. There are a couple of other things that we can manage to shape our perception, and that's going to be these three sources of cognitive bias. The next exercise that you can do, if you feel like the world is going to hell, is you can let's start with the interpretation of ambiguous stimuli. There are studies that basically show, conclusively, that people who are depressed will see ambiguous things and interpret them in the worst ways possible. So, for example, there's one study that showed that if you have a neutral facial expression, right, it's just like depressed people will see that as negative, and normal people will see that as neutral. This person is just like walking; they must be thinking about whatever, right? So it has nothing to do with me. We'll get to that one second. So, what you want to do is take anything that you sort of view as negative, and take a sheet of paper and say, what is the real evidence that you have that this is a negative thing? And what is the evidence that you have to the contrary? This technique is also used in cognitive behavioral therapy. So you take one thing that is negative and you try to see what could be positive there. And the goal isn't that you have to believe that. The goal is literally to practice having your mind look at things in a more nuanced way. We want to be able to weigh pros and cons, but in depression, all we see is the cons. As we do this practice, this will actually work for number 1 and number 2 with the selection bias. That's very, very, very hard to shape, but this the mentality materiality exercise will help with. And let's talk about how for a second. So why does the mentality materiality exercise help with selection bias? So as we begin to see things as they are, instead of our way of interpreting them, this will change the way that we see the world. So then we won't select just the negative because nothing in our life is going to be negative. Everything is actually going to be neutral. And this is the goal that even the Dalai Lama speaks of. So he says the hardest thing to do in the world is to see things as they are. So mentality materiality is going to help with our selection bias. We talked about altering our interpretations of the pro-cons list. And now we get to the good one. Overgeneralization. There's one thing you can do to break the cycle of overgeneralization, which is to remove I from the equation. So if you look at someone who's depressed, one of the key things is that they always think that they're at fault. And this is going to sound really weird because if you pay attention to your thoughts and you're depressed or you're feeling bad, we're not talking about clinical depression, we're just talking about you're kind of in a bad headspace. What you'll find is everything has to do with you. These people would be better off without me. They'd have more fun if I didn't let them go. The work, everyone would be happier at work. Everything is about me. So what we know about depression is it's actually quite narcissistic in some ways. We even know that the part of your brain about you is hyperactive in depression. This is the part of the brain called the default mode network. And this is also why ketamine is one of the fastest treatment for depression that we know of. And what ketamine actually does, you can infuse ketamine or give it to people intranasally. And what ketamine does is causes a dissociative reaction in your brain. So ketamine causes dissociation. That's why we initially use it for anesthesia and surgery. So we give people ketamine and then they lose sight of themselves. And once they lose sight of themselves, nothing hurts. So we literally induce dissociation and it breaks the cycle of depression. So we're going to do that without ketamine because ketamine has all kinds of problems. And so this is what we're going to practice is removing the I from your thinking, right? So what you'll notice is that overgeneralized thinking has to do with I thinking. I know this is getting kind of nuanced, but I really want y'all to hear what I'm saying. So anytime you overgeneralize, it's going to involve I. You'll see that these two thoughts are linked. I suck, right? That is the mother of all overgeneralizations. And so what we want to start doing is literally thinking about particular scenarios, like I went into the break room and I got my coffee and this person got their coffee. And what we end up doing is we think that the reason they didn't talk to us is because they don't like me. We never stop to think, okay, maybe this person is going through a divorce. Maybe this person is preoccupied. Maybe this person has a really stressful day. Maybe this person is really excited about something. Maybe this person just got a really worrying text. We do not think about the other person at all. It always has to do with you. So pay attention to any thoughts that you have in your mind that are overgeneralized and have to do with you. And just take a moment to consider, what about the rest of the world? What could be going on in this person's life to create this behavior? And sometimes people can get so depressed that they literally cannot think of anything. And that's why I encourage y'all to practice as best as you can. And this is the kind of thing, by the way, this cognitive reframing is something that a therapist can really help you with. The last thing that I'm going to share with y'all is something called the thematic apperception test. So what we do with the thematic apperception test is we look at images that are intentionally ambiguous. And then we ask people for their interpretation of them. So as we look at this, like you may say, like, oh, it's very clear what's going on. This person is really sad. But the question is, why are they sad? Did someone just die here? That's my interpretation of this one. What about this? Right? Like, this is kind of creepy. The other reason I like the thematic apperception test is all the images are like super creepy. So this is like a good example of like what's going on here. Like, how are you interpreting this? Is this person trying to smother this person, or is this a blessing that they're giving, or like what are they doing here? Are they about to wake them up? Like, who knows? What about this one? The key thing here is that some of these images can be interpreted very, very differently because the image is purposefully ambiguous. And the whole point of the thematic apperception test is that we don't realize how much our perception shapes literally the way that we see the world. We think of our perception as objective. And the problem is, until we start questioning our perception, then the cycle of depression will continue, because the inputs we're getting that are making us depressed are not actually accurate. They are distorted in some way, and since they're distorted, we see the world in a negative light, then we draw conclusions about the world. Our mind loves to overgeneralize. Then we draw conclusions about ourselves, and then once we believe that we are not good, then all kinds of problems will arise. The question is, how do you short-circuit this? The way you short-circuit it is by actually training, right? So if we can look out for these cognitive biases, the selection bias, the interpretation of ambiguity as negative, and the overgeneralization, it will change literally the way that you see the world. And once the world becomes a different place, it is way easier to be less depressed. Now, there's one last thing that, in all fairness, I have to include. I didn't want to include it, but I kind of got to. The last thing we got to talk about is actually kind of derails what I just told you. There's this great concept called depressive realism. And what basically researchers were trying to figure out is that if I am depressed, or does a depressed person actually see the world in a distorted way, or do they see it in a realistic way? So is the glass literally half empty? And what we've discovered is kind of scary, is that depressed people are better at actually judging the accuracy of the world. So I know this sounds kind of weird, but hear me out. So all human beings have an inherent bias towards the positive. So this is why the lottery is a thing, right? This is why people buy loot boxes. Because every human being thinks that they are better than average. This is factually incorrect. So factually, like, you know that you're not going to win the lottery. There's no point in buying loot boxes. But we each have this intrinsic bias that thinks, even though it doesn't work for other people, I'm a winner. Everybody else who buys lottery tickets is a loser, but I'm a winner. And the problem is that this level of narcissistic idiocy is required for healthy human functioning. This cognitive distortion that the world is a better place than it actually is required for the maintenance of a healthy mind. And so the problem with depressive realism is once we remove that bias and we actually see the world more accurately, which studies will show that they actually are accurate with the way they judge things. But this, even though it's more accurate, it is not, it doesn't view the world in a way that makes us healthy. So I know it sounds kind of weird, but technically depressed people, if you're depressed, you're like actually right about the way that you see things in a lot of ways. These cognitive biases are still at play. So you actually are a better judge of the world not actually about yourself, because all of these cognitive biases will lead to an amplification of the negative. But technically, and we're trying to be precise here, technically depressed people are more accurate judges. That doesn't mean that there aren't distortions as well. And this is just one thing that I had to include for the sake of completion. In a very practical sense, though, we know that if you want a healthy mind, you should change your perception. And this is where my experiences with yoga and stuff are that as I see the world more clearly, as I strengthen my perception, everything does get better, but I don't think that I'm cognitively distorted, because even once you do pratyahara a lot, like you're just going to see the world as it is. It's neither good nor bad. It is just what it is. Anyway, I know it's kind of an aside. I know it's kind of like after the fact, but for all the depressed people out there who really believe that the glass is half empty, y'all are actually not wrong.
Le bouillon concentré Kenbourg a plus de saveur. Vous pouvez augmenter l'intensité de la saveur, la diminuer et modifier le mix jusqu'à le bouillon concentré Kenbourg. Trouvez votre idéal de saveur.
Welcome to the Huberman Lab Conference, where we discuss science and science-based tools for everyday life. I'm Andrew Huberman, and I'm a professor of neurobiology and ophthalmology at Stanford School of Medicine. My guest today is Dr. Adam Grant. Adam Grant is a professor of organizational psychology at the Wharton School at University of Pennsylvania. He has authored 5 best-selling books, and most recently has authored a new book entitled Hidden Potential. He received his bachelor's degree from Harvard University and his doctorate from the University of Michigan. He reviewed studies and tools based on the data from those studies that can enable people to meet their goals and overcome significant challenges, including how to overcome procrastination, as well as how to see around or through blind spots, as well as how to overcome sticking points in most.
The World Economic Forum was hosted yet again in Davos for 2024, and boy, did it get roasted. Welcome to America Uncovered. I'm Chris Chaplin. So, the energy to keep making episodes week after week, year after year? The answer is coffee. Lots of coffee. Specifically, Dave's Coffee, the sponsor of today's episode. It's not just any coffee. It's something no other coffee in America has, which I'll explain in a bit. But first, it's that time of year again, Davos 2024. You can't start a new year without having global elites gather in Switzerland in private jets to talk about combating climate change, listening to each other blabber about lofty, vague ideas, and to meet with prostitutes. The global elites are so generous to give up time in their busy schedules for them. I wouldn't be surprised if the term globalist comes work websites around this time, but I'm too classy to check. For those of you who don't know, Davos is the Swiss town where the annual meeting of the World Economic Forum, or WEF, takes place. The WEF was founded by German economist Klaus Schwab. The forum engages in the foremost leaders of society to shape global, regional, and industry agendas. And the theme for this year is rebuilding trust, which is strange. Do people, for some reason, not trust globalist elites who want to run the world outside of any pesky election? I must have missed the memo. I mean, this doesn't inspire trust. Nevertheless, some people are critical of the WEF. People like Argentina's new president, Javier Milei. This was a guy whose most recent holiday greetings was, I kid you not, happy holidays and be careful not to become a communist. And someone thought it would be a good idea for him to give a speech at the WEF.
Today, I'm here to tell you that the Western world is in danger. And it is in danger because those who are supposed to have to defend the values of the West are co-opted by a vision of the world that inexorably leads to socialism and thereby to poverty. The main leaders of the Western world have abandoned the model of freedom for different versions of what we call collectivism. Thank you very much, and long live freedom. Damn it.
Wow, I have never heard a translator so fierce yet bored at the same time until now. Milei, who's known for being very libertarian, went on to point out how free enterprise capitalism has lifted people out of poverty and criticized state interventionists, socialists, social justice warriors, and neo-Marxists. His remarks are a huge jab at the World Economic Forum's call for a great reset of capitalism, its criticism of free markets, and its environmental, social, and governance metrics, which many argue push socialist agendas. To add further insult to injury, Milei reportedly arrived in Switzerland on a commercial flight, which appears to be a major diss at the global elites coming in with their private jets. Milei's spokesman explained in a post that the commercial to say what he calculated as over $300,000. Milei wasn't the only one to diss global elites at Davos. The president of the Heritage Foundation, a conservative DC-based think tank, likewise slammed the global elites straight to their faces in a discussion about a possible Republican administration.
And if I may, I will be candid and say that the agenda that every single member of the administration needs to have is to compile a list of everything that's ever been proposed at the World Economic Forum wholesale. It's laughable that you would, or anyone would describe Davos as protecting liberal democracy. That's your part of the problem. Political elites tell the average people on 3 or 4 or 5 issues that the reality is X, when in fact reality is Y.
Wow, this gives me Ricky Gervais vibes. Too bad he's not as funny, but it was a nice roast nonetheless. And compared to typical Davos talks, clips of people roasting Davos garner a lot more attention on the internet. Gotta love the internet. So let's talk about why some people have a problem with the WEF. Right after this quick coffee break. Oh, so what kind of coffee am I drinking? Why, of course, it's Days Coffee. And I want to tell you why I love this particular coffee so much. For one, it has very low acidity compared to most coffees. That makes it taste a lot better. It's not bitter like most coffees, and it's gentle on my tummy. It has only 15% of the caffeine of a regular coffee, which is good for reducing caffeine dependency, and I can also enjoy multiple cups of coffee a day. It's just the right amount of kick I need without jitters or a caffeine crash. So how does Days make this special coffee? First, they collect only premium-grade coffee beans from Colombia, Guatemala, Brazil, and Ethiopia. Then they treat the beans with 50 enzymes and ferment them. It's a patented process developed by a former cancer researcher at Yale, a team of South Korean scientists. Another great thing about their fermentation process is that it completely gets rid of mycotoxins. Those are toxins produced by mold and fungi you might find in some of the cheaper brands of coffee beans. But you won't find them in Days. So believe me, Days Coffee is varied. It's got notes of dark chocolate, butterscotch, brown sugar, and nuttiness. The beans are roasted in New York's Hudson Valley. So when you order Days Coffee using my link below, you'll get a special discount. And once you order, they'll roast it right before they ship it to you. So it's just about as fresh as you can get by mail. So click the link below and try it out. So as I was saying, why do people love roasting Davos elites in the World Economic Forum? What did the Davos elites do to create so much distrust? Well, aside from blatant hypocrisy, like talking about climate change while flying into Davos on private jets, and disconnected virtue signaling, this was really weird. People are wary of rich, powerful elites who think that they know what's best to solve the world's problems without sharing the same values as average people, or even having their consent in mind. Klaus Schwab fuels these concerns, especially when he hypes up how Davos elites have what it takes to determine the future.
The future is not just happening. The future is built by us, by a powerful community as you here in this room. We have the means to improve the state of the world.
The fact that he's so confident that elites can social engineer the world frightens a lot of people, and rightfully so. To illustrate why, let's not forget that the World Economic Forum featured an opinion piece back in 2016 by a member of the Danish Parliament with the headline, "Welcome to 2030. I own nothing, have no privacy, and life has never been better." How could anyone forget this piece of work? I'm pretty sure people in 3500 BC had property and privacy. But hey, that's progress. Fantasizing about taking away the average person's private property turns a lot of people off, particularly if the people promoting it are those with tons of private property and wealth. Davos elites are fine with average people not owning anything, then it's not surprising that they're okay with changing people's lifestyles, including their diets.
My daughter, 24, inspired me and said that how can you advocate for these zero carbon value chains if you still eat meat? And so I stopped eating meat. Now the math would say, well, you need to stop eating meat in 11 years to compensate for a flight to Thailand. Yes, but if 1 billion people stop eating meat, I tell you it has a big impact.
Yes, stop eating meat, you destroyer of the planet. Eat creepy crawly bugs instead. After I'm done filming, I'm going to go eat 5 steaks just in opposition to that. And despite the forum's elites' lip service on things like gender equality, many fear that the World Economic Forum is promoting economic fascism through things like stakeholder capitalism and ESG, or at the very least, crony capitalism on steroids. After all, you've got a bunch of powerful business people rubbing shoulders with politicians. You're telling me that Davos business elites wouldn't try to do anything shady? The prostitutes are a red flag. It's no wonder people shiver when they hear things like how Davos elites want to build a new world order. So whenever the World Economic Forum brings up technology that tracks data, such as microchips, carbon footprint trackers, and smart toilets, people are going to assume the worst of Davos elite intentions, regardless of the content. They'll also assume the worst. Okay.
I'm going to give you my number 1 tip to get over a breakup, and that is going to be going to therapy. Going to therapy helped me so.
Hey, hi, everybody. My name is Jerry Wise, and I've been helping people for over 45 years and helped thousands of clients from narcissistic, dysfunctional, alcoholic, and emotionally immature families get unstuck and heal and get their family of origin out of them. And in this video, I want to talk about signs that you may be a victim of emotional incest, particularly for adult children of narcissists. I understand that everybody's situation is different. Some people have narcissistic parents, which they want nothing to do with their child. You know, they may be totally wanting to cut off and be avoidant. Then there are others who become very, very over-involved. And I think for many, there tends to be more like being a companion of the narcissist in the positives, meaning being best friends or things like that, maybe a golden child kind of thing, or a companion of the negative, which is the scapegoat. But both include being an over-involved object of the narcissistic parent. And we don't want to be an over-involved object of a parent. And we are over-involved object of the parent's narcissistic emotionality, narcissistic passions, and narcissistic preoccupation. Our roles in emotional incest is to meet the needs and realities of the parent. But parenting is about meeting the needs of the child, not meeting the needs of the parent. So what are some of the signs that you want to take a look at? First of all, we want to take a look at relationship failures. If you've had a lot of relationship failures where you have maybe become way too close too quickly, and it ends up blowing up, and the relationship ends up in abandonment, rejection, and pulling apart. If we have a number of relationships like that, I think that could be a sign that having come from a past of emotional incest. Emotional incest is about meeting the needs of a family member's, doesn't have to just be a parent, but a family member's dependency needs versus having them meet the child's needs. And this could be there are 8 kids in the family, and the oldest sibling ends up kind of being like a parent, and they become emotionally over involved with 1 or 2 or 3 of the siblings in too deep of relationship. I have had clients where people who are the oldest sibling, they still feel like they're the parent to their siblings. And that role continues on even after the parents are gone. Second of all, there may be sexual addiction or rejection of sex, either way, some kind of polarity about sex, rather than it being kind of a neutral, pleasurable, appropriate, loving, intimate type of experience. And when we have those kinds of difficulties, I start looking for, has there been emotional incest? And where has that happened? And again, emotional incest does not necessarily include it at all sexual physicalness, but it's still kind of creepy. It feels kind of, when I remember having a friend, they were talking about their dad, and he was being a little rageful with her, and she just withdrew from him because, wait a minute, I don't have to take this. This is wrong. You can't call me those names. And then he whines and comes back to her and says, oh, honey, I love you so much. I've always loved you. You need to come back and help your dad feel better. And it almost has a feeling of kind of a wooing by a lover. It has that flavor to it where I love you. I need you back. We as parents that's not something that's good for us to do. It's creepy. And if you were to read this communication with the dad, you'd be going, who is he? And that's very normal for him. He would see that as very normal. And he doesn't know why his daughter doesn't continue to see that as normal. And again, I think it's emotional incest. She's never been sexually abused by him, but the overtones of this lover relationship emotionally are just too strong. And that can make relationships more difficult. So sex can become a problem, either too much or too little in your life, or it's out of balance in some way.
Hey, it's Tony Robbins. Listen, I don't know how often you think about the quality of your life and how you can really take charge, caught up in making a living and not really design your life. New Year's offers a new opportunity. It's like a fresh start. It's artificial, of course. It's just a calendar. But usually people get a little momentum in the beginning. But they set some goals, maybe set some New Year's resolutions, and 90% of them never come to pay.
Thirdly, a struggle to commit. Many who have been may have difficulties in committing to relationships because we've not really learned much about healthy relationships. And that can be even after you commit to a marriage and get married. I know many people who are married but have a hard time with commitment. So marriage doesn't end the commitment struggle. And so I think it can be hard to commit if you've had that emotional incest past where you have become, for the parent, a partner. Parentification is when a parent's child becomes a parent. Emotional incest is where a child becomes the parent's partner emotionally. And I think that happens often in dysfunctional families. So if we look and see if we have a struggle to commit, that's something you may want to be aware of. Number 4, triangles. It's common, I hear lots about a triangle between a husband, a wife, and a parent, or a husband, a wife, and parents. When there's that kind of triangle going on, where let's say the husband feels caught between his mother and his wife, or where a wife gets caught between her parents and her husband. If you're caught, then you're in a triangle. And oftentimes that can be a sign of emotional incest. And so those are ways to begin to resolve that triangle, and I think resolve and heal from emotional incest. I think it's a lot more common than people realize how often it happens. And I have read thousands of letters from parents to children, from children to parents, and I hear the language, and and sometimes it can just make the hair on the back of your neck stand up. And I believe that's very possible. I think even with my own mother, there was emotional incest. She never sexually abused me at all, but there was just this over familiarity, And I don't know that mom and dad had all that great a relationship. It was a kind of a committed relationship, but I'm not sure how much in terms of marital satisfaction they had. And when we don't have that satisfaction, then it tends to spill out to children and other people. Number 5, loneliness and emptiness. If you experience loneliness and emptiness, there's a good chance that you have difficulty, or there may be a possibility of emotional incest in your past. If you want to heal, and I've got some more signs I want to talk about, if you want to heal, I would suggest going to my recovery program that's listed below, in which you can learn much more about these dynamics. You can also learn how to begin to get it out of you, because we want to get that emotional incest, then we need to heal and recover from it. And also then deal with the parent, if they're still living, or the family members that are still living. How do we deal with them and keep the emotional incest down? They can think and do whatever they want to do, but what are we going to do when they start coming in with that lover relationship type of talking and over involvement with us, and how we're going to handle that? So check out the program below, click the link, you'll see the details, etc. You also get a year's worth of coaching once a month in a group setting with me, and those are live group sessions. I would recommend that. And number 6, parents had a troubled marriage, whether they stayed together or not. That can be another sign for emotional incest. Because if there's a troubled marriage, then where do all those feelings go that mom and dad should be having for each other and should be satisfying with each other? Where do all those go? Typically, they either go many times to a hobby for a man, maybe to a hobby, to work, to his princess, his little princess, or mom has her little man, her little prince, her little favorite child, and we have that emotional incest flowing over out of the dysfunction of the marriage. And that's very common these days. I would recommend the book Silently Seduced by Kenneth Adams, Dr. Kenneth Adams. I think it's a great book you might want to take a look at. Silently Seduced. I hope that you will take advantage of recovery for yourself. And I want to thank you today for watching. Have a great day and be wise.
Want to grab a coffee?
Getting lost with you is like being found.
Hello, everybody. Welcome. I'm Lee Camp. Welcome to Dangerous Ideas. As you might be able to tell, this is not live streamed, but instead is a video premiere because I've had to unexpectedly travel. So I am bringing you the episode. I'm taping it a couple of hours before you're seeing it, but that will not change the information I have to give you. And I've got a